In this video, we are going to be talking about what's going on in the market, some NFT drama that's completely shutting down projects, as well as some major updates on some of our favorite projects. Okay, so checking on the health of the crypto markets, obviously we want to look at what alternative coins are doing first before we go into NFTs. Seems like everything is pretty much trading sideways once again, so pretty boring. A lot of people are saying that this might be a bull trap where, things pump up and then maybe they'll crash later. Who really knows at this point? My personal take is there's a higher chance of things going down than going up from here, but hey, nobody really knows the answer. Everybody's wrong all the time, so just keep that in mind. During a bear market, I did think about this personally for myself and me just talking to my friends. I feel like for me, one of the more safer bets is really, if there ever is like a huge surge or a huge dip in Ethereum, for me, that's when I personally would want to pick some up because I do believe in it long term. Obviously not financial advice, do your own research and, everything could go to zero, so just be mindful of that. Now, diving into the NFT drama for the day, this is a project called 1984. I was aware of this project and it seemed pretty cool because they had these collaborations with Casey Neistat to create some content for this. They hype it up right off the bat based on the art that they put out. It seems like people were gravitating to this type of art style. Now, where are the challenges when it comes to this particular project? If you must know, there's some drama between some of the co-founders who are fighting over control of the company. So long story short, I'll try to summarize it for you real quick. There are a couple founders, part of the project. They hired an artist and they agreed to pay the artist a fixed fee, which is not that much relative to what they potentially think they can mint. But at the time, nobody knew if this project would take off or not. Also, this is a funded startup that has raised money from investors and they spent hundreds of $1,000s to put all these things together. But then as things started taking off with the Casey Neistat collaboration and the art getting a lot of traction on Twitter, the artist wanted to renegotiate to get more equity, or get equity, actually, they didn't have equity before, into the company and be like a co-founder, right? Now, some people wanted this, some people didn't want this, and basically there's this battle going on between the different parties of people that feel like the artist deserves equity, other people don't believe the artist deserves equity. And then Alex, who's also one of the founders of Val, which is a Valhalla, another project, so interesting that he's involved in two projects at the same time. According to the story, he's quite pivotal in the project in terms of raising money and leading the project, and he wanted the artist to get equity, and then another person didn't want it to get equity. So in the end, Alex decided that he's not going to be running 1984 anymore, focusing his attention on Val, which makes sense because at this point, it's like if the artist doesn't want to work, and the founders don't really agree with each other, and this is literally just beginning and they haven't minted yet, then it's going to be very challenging to pull off a successful mint because the market confidence is not there. If people don't believe you have the team together and you're all focused in one direction, then why would people take the risk to actually mint your project? I did dig deeper into this to see all the different perspectives, but you never know what might happen, right? Maybe they might revive the brand, maybe they might work together. If people don't want to work together and they have different priorities or they have different opportunities where they see other potential, then, so be it. And, by the time this video comes out, I'm sure there's going to be more news about what's going on. For me, what are some of the learning lessons that I'm taking from this whole experience? Well, not that it's my experience. I'm just outside looking in, right? One of the things that Alex said is that they raised $500,000 from 7 angel investors as a YC safe. I mean, I'm not expert when it comes to these kind of things, but it seems like, the project founders have all the control and then investors just invest, but they have no say, right? They raised $500,000 to get this going. Obviously, they got to hire people. It's expensive, especially if you're hiring in America, and then you got to pay for all these things. So some of the things they're paying for is $110K for a video with a Ferrari, $70K shooting a video at NYC with his face on the billboard, and then $100K spent on a 1 minute 2D animation starring him. This person is the Conde, I believe that's how you say it. But it's interesting that, how much money they're spending to kind of get the word out there for these teaser videos and getting the NYC billboard. If you have funding, you want to do these things to make a splash, that does make sense. But at the same time, it kind of puts you in the very vulnerable position where you have to spend so much money to get your name out there. Personally, me being in the NFT space, there are different ways to generate interest, generate marketing that could probably be a lot more cost effective, right? Yes, it can go pretty far, but then there are different ways to get traction and not have to risk so much money. So I think if you're starting your own project, understand what budget you're working with and whether or not, you might be able to see an ROI. I would actually recommend smaller projects spend less money to try to get product market fit, try to generate a narrative before they start spending big because you never know if it will work or not. But if you have major budgets and you want to raise a bunch of money from a bunch of VCs, totally cool, totally up to you. You want to go big right off the bat. So, different ways to approach it. Stepping away from 1984 and just looking at projects in general, I feel like if a project raises a lot of money from VCs, one of the biggest challenges is there's no clear path to revenue, right? There's just ideas, which is okay because every NFT project, including myself, is a lot of ideas, right? That we have to execute on to see if what works. But if you raise a lot of money right off the bat, the only revenue generated is actually the mint. So then you'll spend so much money on the mint that you don't know will actually succeed. And then after you mint, you have more money and you're okay, well, we got to use this money to do Gen 2. And it's this never ending cycle of constant mint. So brands these these days should always think about like what is their monetization strategy. It doesn't mean they have to monetize like this year, but it means that they have a path that they're working towards, not necessarily just, you know, creating a mint to generate, have to create another mint. That strategy is a little bit played out. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult to do. And I would say if you're a newer project coming out and you're a Web2 business moving to Web3, then I would actually just try to figure out revenue streams that directly relate to your Web2 business and combine it with a digital membership that is NFTs. So that's just my personal take on that from a business point of view, but I'll be following this, maybe reporting on it tomorrow to see what the news is all about. Now, another tweet that I saw by Otto Suwin, I probably butchering his name, but it's cool. I've been following him on Twitter for a bit. Interesting comment he said is like many NFT projects I've invested in is starting to run out of money. These projects will likely cease development in the future. It's sad. Going to be the norm for the most of the space. I wouldn't necessarily consider this situation a rug. It's just unfortunate for everyone. This is quite interesting because, you know, during a bear market, when everybody raised funds during a bull market, sometimes they're gonna overhire. Maybe they don't know how to leverage their money or use it in the right places and they overspend. And then they eventually run out of money and they go bust, right? If you are investing in NFTs, understand it's a high risk startup investment in a sense, probably even riskier than that. And a lot of times projects may have the right intentions and they may feel that they're doing everything to the book and trying to be transparent. But from the outside, the holders might be like, oh my God, this is a rug. They're incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. But there's a difference between rugging, like actually scamming, and being incompetent and just not being able to succeed. So I would say that if your bags are down and the team is actually trying, just understand that it's very hard to do a startup. But if they're rugging, then they're rugging, then whatever, you know, say what you want, because, you know, scammers are scammers and I don't think that's good for the space. He said like plenty of projects raise 6 figures from their mints, let's call it like a couple $100,000, and that's sustainable for about 1 or 2 years. That does make sense, right? Depending on where you're paying people around the world. If you're not generating revenue right off the bat, then you probably only have a couple years to live. If you have millions in the bank, then it's quite a different story. Like some projects may have more than 10 million and you probably know what they are, right? This guy was like, oh, like what about Raid Party? But it seems like that team took out 8 figures and cashed out. I never like looked at the wallet to like double check, but that's probably true, honestly. So it's kind of unfortunate that the space is kind of like that, where people are taking out way too much, especially in the beginning when they only created a basic game. It's quite disrespectful in my opinion towards the market. But yeah, man, like I think in the future there probably will be a need for more transparency of how people pay their funds. I mean, it doesn't have to be like, oh, you see their entire bookkeeping, but it's like generally like how much did the founder get paid, or percentage wise at least, and how much is being invested. I think those are the basics that people should at least understand. But hey, you know, the space is new. It's a wild west. Like 1 year ago, nobody was even asking for a roadmap. So just understand that this is the game that we all play, right? And something interesting about Project Godjira, people have different opinions on them, right? But one thing that they do pretty well is the transparency of like, there are challenges every project has. They're willing to just say, hey, we know we have these problems. Here's the things we're going to do. Great. And then they're also pretty transparent with how they allocate the funds and what salary they pay themselves and things like that. And they definitely did take an extra step to let people know that, just to try to show people that they're legit. From my understanding, Project Godjira actually does make money from advising and things like that. So it's like, you know, minting is not their only revenue stream. I think they also help other projects launch and things like that. So it's interesting to see the different routes that people take. Some people go the route of like, let's just build this big project and we're going to raise a lot of money. Other people are like, let's use our project as almost like a form of marketing to find different revenue streams, right? So different ways to go. One is not better than the other. It just depends on what the goal of the project is and if you communicate that clearly to your holders. Now, in other news, Gucci has recently announced that they will be accepting Apecoin payments via BitPay at select Gucci boutiques and USA. So this is a pretty big step for crypto, where a luxury brand wants to use an alternative coin to accept payment. And it's interesting that they would choose Apecoin out of all the different coins, right? Like Bitcoin, for example, or Ethereum, but most likely because there's some backdoor connection or some business development that happened that somehow Gucci is incentivized to be using Apecoin in certain senses, right? Maybe Gucci is an investor in Bored Ape or Yuga Labs, right? Who knows, right? Because they're not really sharing all that public information. But the fact that you can use Apecoin in the real world is an interesting concept. Does this necessarily mean that more and more retailers will use Apecoin? I think we'll have to see. I would also say that it's quite speculative and quite more of a novelty and more of a marketing piece that will get people talking. I don't think people are gonna like cash in their Apecoins at the Gucci store because, you know, the price of Apecoin fluctuates so much. It doesn't really make sense to use it as a currency because one day Apecoin might be $4, next thing it's 10, next thing it's like 2, right? And so it's like you don't actually want to use it as currency. You actually want to use it more as a speculative investment, in my personal opinion, or if you just believe in the project. If anything, it would actually make more sense to use a stable coin like USDC at these kind of stores, right? Because you would just convert your Ethereum or Apecoin to USDC. You can actually use crypto and not give your identity at a store. So that would actually be more useful. And that's why I feel like it's more of a novelty, more of a marketing play to get people to understand like, hey, we're Gucci, we understand NFTs. So I think that's the play that they're going for. How much volume will Apecoin have at the Gucci stores? Interesting to be seen, but probably not that much. But hey, you know, you never know, I might be wrong. But interesting indeed that the market is progressing in this way. And so with that said, that's everything we got to cover for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next one.